Good evening, and welcome to our study for this Wednesday, April 12th. Let me go in the news a little bit for you tonight. Let's talk about the New World Order and what's happening there. This article comes out this week. The World Economic Forum's AI enslavement is coming for you. It seems as if not a generation goes by when some megalomaniac does not rise to proclaim, "If only the world does exactly as I demand, I will deliver your paradise here on earth, a utopia." Usually these same narcissists go down in history remembered as either vainglorious buffoons or bloodthirsty tyrants, often both. Today, Klaus Schwab, you've heard me say his name before, rises as the leader of the World Economic Forum, the WEF, to promise a great reset for the human race. He envisions a future utopia achieved through technological precision, centralized management of Earth's resources, careful observation of citizens, the merger of human and artificial intelligence, AI, and the monopolarization of governmental power by a small professional class, the elites, with recognized quote-unquote expertise. The WEF, its mission objective is remarkably simple. The smartest, best people in the world should rule everyone else. It's not a new concept. For a half a century, the WEF's members have been on a quest to devise the perfect global government without any say from Western nations' voting populations. And to no one's surprise, those same philosopher kings have nominated themselves to do the ruling. How convenient. Obviously, this plays into what John has told us about, a one world government, a one world elite force. Experts, quote unquote, on climate change will determine what kinds of energy may be used by businesses or consumers. We're already getting there. Experts on sustainability will determine what foods humans may eat, not the elites, just other humans. Experts on disinformation will determine what kind of news and which side of a debate may be known and promoted. We're seeing that as we're watching our First Amendment rights be trampled everywhere. Experts on healthcare will determine how many times each citizen must be injected with ever new vaccines, whether citizens must be kept in lockdown, of course for their own good, and whether face masks must be worn to prove continuing compliance. Experts on extremism will determine what kinds of speech are harmful. Experts on racism will determine which groups in society have an unfair privilege. Experts in inequality will determine what property must be taken and which groups the state should reward. Experts in whatever the state requires will determine that the state is acting reasonably every step of the way. However, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, individual rights, and other personal liberties will mean little in a WEF constructed future. If it sounds more dystopian than utopian, and every bit like an unwanted prison overseen by unaccountable government agents, that's precisely what the WEF is. In essence, the goal is to create a digital Pentagon implementing all of the surveillance programs to provide future rulers with absolute control, while leaving everyone else in a permanent state of docile incarceration. Google is on board with such control. Microsoft founder Bill Gates feels the same way. Microsoft has already been using a British think tank, Global Disinformation Index, GDI, to secretly blacklist conservative media companies in the United States and prevent them from generating advertising revenue. The kicker? The U.S. State Department has been funding GDI's disinformation work through taxpayer funds to the National Endowment for Democracy and its own Global Engagement Center. Clearly, if Schwab's World Economic Forum intends to usher in an AI-powered utopia where he can be the master of the world, then he has little use for us, human beings. In a very real sense, humans become nothing more than things to be counted, shuffled, categorized, tagged, monitored, manipulated, and controlled. You know what that tells me? It brings me right back to Revelation. We become a mark. We become a number. And that's where the global elites are trying to head. Let's go a little bit further and tell you a little bit about Israel. Middle East expert, Iran is planning a multi-front attack on Israel, different than anyone they've had before. Dr. Mordecai Kedar is a senior lecturer at Bar Ilan University and the vice president of Newsrael. He served for 25 years in the IDF military intelligence, specializing in Syria. On Sunday, Dr. Kedar published an op-ed on the Hebrew language Makor Rishon, describing a shocking security situation developing in the region that represents a dire and real threat to Israel. He says this: "A source I have known for years, an expatriate from the Middle East, a supporter of Israel, who lives in Europe and is in continuous contact with people in Iran and Iraq, conveyed to me his assessment that Iran is planning to launch a combined attack on Israel in the foreseeable future that will include all the forces at its disposal in the Arab countries. Among the groups involved in the plot against Israel, and some of them you haven't even heard of. Matter of fact, let me just inject this for a moment. In Damascus itself, there are 22 anti-Israeli groups that want to see Israel wiped off the face of the map. Here's some of them, some of the names not even pronounceable. Zayin Biyun Brigade, the Harakat al-Nujuba, Hezbollah, you've heard of that one, the Abu al-Fashai Brigade, Asa'ab Abi al-Haq Brigade, the Khorsani Brigade, and others. Iran transferred a very large number of missiles and UAVs to Syria, and these are ready to be launched. Dr. Kader's prediction seems to be already materializing. On Thursday afternoon, 34 rockets were fired at northern Israel from Lebanon. In the evening, several mortar shells impacted near the northern town of Metula. Now, the Iron Dome has taken out almost 95% of them. But listen to it, because the enemies of Israel know about the Iron Dome. On Saturday night, 6 projectiles were launched at Israel from Syrian territory. In Iraq, dozens of militias are armed with missiles and UAVs, Dr. Kedar warned. In Yemen, the Houthis have missiles and long-range UAVs that could actually reach Israel. In Gaza, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad have missiles capable of disabling the Israeli Defense Forces and Air Force bases. Dr. Kedar understood these facts in the current context of increasing tensions focused on the Temple Mount. Under the pretext of the duty of the Muslim world to save the Al-Aqsa Mosque from Israel occupation and oppression, such as happened 4 days ago, when Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told his Iranian counterpart, Ebrahim Raisi, on the phone that the Islamic world should be united against Israel's oppression of Al-Aqsa. Iran will conduct a staged, comprehensive, integrated, and coordinated attack on Israel, Dr. Kedar wrote. He goes on to say this: the first phase will be an aerial attack, including a massive, coordinated barrage of missiles and UAVs from all of the aforementioned arenas. Dr. Kedar explained that the Iranian strategy is that the stock of interceptors for the Iron Dome will run out within 2 or 3 hours of the beginning of the air attack. In other words, they're going to launch all their missiles simultaneously at the same time from Gaza, from Syria, from Hezbollah and Lebanon, even from Yemen. They will bombard the Iron Dome, and the Iron Dome will run out of missiles in 2 to 3 hours. He goes on to say this. He explained the Iranian strategy is that the stock of interceptors for the Iron Dome will run out. The next phase will focus on the Air Force, which will be damaged and grounded. The initial aerial phase will be accomplished by a cyber attack on Israeli infrastructure systems, Dr. Kedar wrote. After a full day of a cyber attack and a rain of missiles and UAVs that will hit Air Force bases, Navy bases, Army bases, electricity, computing communication, road and water infrastructures. The second phase will begin a coordinated ground attack from Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza by infantry. Forces mounted on conventional military vehicles, as well as dirt bikes and ATVs equipped with anti-tank weapons. They will cross the border and attack the Israeli ground forces in order to reach Jewish settlements as quickly as possible. Also, he said this: the Iranians expect Arabs in Galilee and the Negev to carry out actions against the IDF in the state, such as blocking roads, damaging bridges, spilling oil on roads, blocking intersections, damaging high voltage lines, and attacking Jewish settlements. These operations will cause great damage to Israel and its ability to withstand the ground assault. So when we talk about other wars that are happening for Israel, or even the war of Psalm 83, you're talking about these nations coordinating themselves. This will be the first time ever that they will do that. And if they did do that, you remember me telling you, Israel is surrounded by 22 aggressive Arab nations. So if they do a coordinated attack, which is never done before, They will bombard Israel. We also know that God tells us, or Ezekiel tells us that even if it's the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war of Gog and Magog, even if Russia joins in, that God will come to the defense of Israel. So there's a lot of things happening right now that smacks right in the face of prophecy and brings us right up to date with which has been prophesied in Scripture for almost 3,900 years. Let me go a little further and tell you about this. Something we don't normally think about. God saved the children in Israel. Many of us have children. We have grandchildren. We love them. We see them. And of course, we want to protect them. But think about this. It's the worst at night. The stillness shattered by blaring sirens. The confusion, the shouting, the heart-pounding scramble for cover. The huddling together in the darkness, breathing hard, praying, sobbing, bracing for an explosion. Then going back to bed and trying to sleep. Or going to bed the next night and the night after that. Not knowing whether the next missile attack will come, but knowing that it will come. In Israel, innocent children are often the youngest victims of terrorism. They see their parents' faces tight with worry. They hear the news reports. They attend the funerals. They pass the damaged homes and buildings, step over the rubble on their way to school. Not long ago, an elementary school in Lod, Israel, was evacuated following a missile strike, and the children stood outside on the playground and they watched with horror as their classrooms burned to the ground from the missile strike. Can you imagine your children or grandchildren witnessing something like that? Imagine what living under the constant shadow of death and destruction must do to these children. The violence that rocked the city of Lod in recent years has compounded the already existing social problems that many of the children suffer from, such as parental neglect, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and crime. The children of Israel urgently need our help today. We can't count on things getting better in this part of the world anytime soon. So we must support these kids in the midst of their most difficult challenges. So what I did is I did some research, and I wanted to know if there are any programs in Israel that specifically help these children. I found 3 of them. Save the youngest victims of terrorism, bring hope and healing to children, and havens of calm. So if you want to be able to look into those, maybe you can support them. I don't know any of them. All I know is I did the research, and I'm going to do more research because it's a crime. It's a shame what's happening to those kids. Let me go a little bit further and tell you a little bit about economy. The coming food crisis that no one is talking about. Severe drought is crippling winter wheat production in the middle of our country. Agricultural production in many areas of California is being hit extremely hard by unprecedented flooding, and orange production in Florida is down more than 60% from last season due to a combination of factors. We don't hear this on any of the nightly news because they're too busy with all their political wranglings back and forth. Of course, this comes at a time when the entire world is dealing with a major food crisis. Even CNN is admitting that we are currently in the midst of the worst food crisis in modern history. They just gave it a blip, but at least they did. So this is a year when we need U.S. food production to be very strong. And simply, it's not happening. Less than 20% of Kansas winter wheat is in good or excellent condition, only 20%. Unfortunately, the winter wheat in other crucial states is also greatly suffering due to seemingly endless drought conditions. Colorado winter wheat was rated 33% very poor to poor. Oklahoma and Texas crops were rated 40 and 47% very poor to poor. It's really bad news. Wheat prices just continue to escalate, and it's especially true for hard red winter wheat. And by the way, you can expect bread prices to go up. Our inflation is only going to get worse with all these shortages. Meanwhile, the outlook for spring wheat is not particularly promising either, because U.S. farmers have planted the smallest amount of spring wheat since 1972. Out in the West Coast, too much water is the problem. In fact, 78 trillion gallons of water has fallen in the state of California in recent months. It's just the beginning. The mountains of California are absolutely teeming with unprecedented amounts of snow right now. And when it all starts melting, all that water is going to have to go somewhere. On the East Coast, the big news is what has happened to Florida's orange production. At this point, it's down a whopping 60.7% from last year. This drop in production has been caused by citrus greening disease and a very tough hurricane season. Sadly, there are some farmers that have lost almost all of their oranges. Top of everything else, the number of beef cows in the United States, I've been telling you this, has dropped to the lowest level since 1962. And let me remind you that we have a whole lot more consumers of beef in 2023 than we did in 1962, because ranchers in the middle of the nation have to cull their herds due to historic drought. U.S. food production has been hit by disasters in the past, but we've never had so many strikes in a short period of time, and the weather just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Of course, all this is happening in a broader context also. Global food supplies just keep getting tighter and tighter, and the head of the UN World Food Program is warning that, quote, we literally could have hell on earth if we're not very careful, end of quote. Global hunger has been rising at a very rapid rate in recent years, and it's going to continue to rise. All over the world, topsoil is being depleted at a frightening rate. Let me give you my own opinion. It's time America and the world wake up. Famine is a word that we will hear more and more in the coming years. Isn't that what Jesus talked about in Matthew chapter 24? Is it upon us right now? That's not enough. Let me give you war and what's happening on the horizon for there. The U.S. is running out of time, this article says. China races to dominate military and emerging technology. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, openly says it wants to establish dominance in emerging critical technologies as part of its strategy to, listen, supplant the United States as the world's dominant power. Yes, we are the dominant power for now. And they want to establish a new world order, their words, and replace the U.S.-led international system established after World War II. The U.S. has only a little time left in this race. Reports indicate that deep cuts to the military, U.S. military, made by several administrations, have severely impaired its ability to catch up. China has been, in the meantime, supercharging its military for years, while the U.S. has sat back, watched, and argued about unrelated social issues. It's more woke than wanting to be ready. China is in an additional race with the U.S. in the field of advanced data analytics, the ability to sift through enormous amounts of information at great speeds, using artificial intelligence, AI, both to identify trends and to predict events. Intelligence collection tracking systems have been vastly improved in China as we have lagged behind. They now have the swarming drone pack, whereby one drone can transmit data simultaneously to an entire swarm. And it can, in addition, both help or complicate U.S. NATO Special Forces operations and missions. China has so far aggressively been leading in the extraction of rare earth materials necessary for vital weapon systems. China dominates the extraction of neodymium necessary for intercontinental ballistic missiles and samarium needed for nuclear reactors. Communist China is currently preparing its people for war. America is not. The American people, who take their magical lives, when compared to so many people in the world, for granted, may be in for a tormenting shock in the very near future. I hate being the harbinger of bad news, but nobody's warning, nobody's preparing anyone, nobody's saying anything about this. We are almost asleep at the wheel in America. We're worrying about wokeism, and we should, but we're not preparing for anything. And we are very, very vulnerable, more vulnerable than we have ever been in a nation. And it should scare people. It should get them understand. And let me just be perfectly clear. Our government isn't working. The Democrats obviously aren't working, and neither are the Republicans. These people are seasoned politicians, and they do not have your future and my future in mind. So don't be fooled to think that one party is over another. They may favor some differences of opinion that you may like, but trust me, all of them are sitting on their hands. Let me go a little bit further before I get off on a tangent. Let's tell you a little about religion, what's happening in America. Not sure Nashville attacks against churches, not just Nashville attacks against churches nearly triple so far in 2023. This is shocking. Last week's mass murder of 6 people at a church-run Christian school constitutes 2023's deadliest act of violence against churches, which have increased nearly 3 times this year compared to last year. A new report from the Family Research Council finds the number of anti-church attacks in 2022 has already tripled over 4 years, a previous report found. In all, assailants attacked churches 69 times in the first 3 months alone of 2023, a 288% increase over the same period of time last year. The rising tempo of anti-Christian assaults, which includes arsons, bomb threats, vandalism, and sacrilege, has affected places of worship in 29 states. The motives behind such desecration run from the gamut from pro-abortion activism or controversy over transgender ideology to apparently senseless acts of destruction. American churches are increasingly bearing the brunt of anger and aggression, whether that's from political or other motivations. I'm going to jump ahead of myself in a moment. It contributes to an environment of hostility towards Christianity. Why? Well, let me give you the full reason why. We have thrown God out of our nation since 1960s, early 60s. And what we've done is invited every demon and every evil spirit to come back sevenfold. And you're watching them. When demon possession happens, and I'm going to talk about it, when demon possession happens, it takes over the body of someone. That means it could take over somebody who's transgender, changing the sex, changing the desire to change. These are not new demons. These are old demons that have been around since the early church. You can find false gods that were responsible for changing the sex of male to females, females to males. This is what happens when you have a demon infiltrated nation or country. They give their bodies over. They give their culture over. They give their religion and their aspirations over. Demons want possession. They don't want to just play around. They want possession. We are watching a violent transgender society. Less than 1%, hear me right, less than 1% of our nation taking over this nation. It's nothing less than a demonic attack. It is warfare on the highest spiritual level you can get. And trust me, I don't care what scientists say. I understand gender dysphoria. I understand all about it. I understand the fact that it's definitely something that affects people, but it should never take over a nation. Never. And you're going to see it happen more and more. Let me show you what's happening in churches. Why are churches being targeted? The acts of anti-church aggression documented between January and March of this year include this: 53 incidents of vandalism. I did the research. 10 suspicious fires, 3 gun-related incidents, 3 bomb threats, including a pipe bomb recovered outside Philadelphia's 127-year-old St. Dominic Catholic Church. The month of January 2023 had more church attacks than any single month in the last 10 years. Last month, transgender activists lashed out at a Kentucky legislators who voted against their agenda by defacing a historic church. Individuals who identify as transgender have focused their rage on Christian facilities as well. Don't tell me this isn't demonic. Don't tell me this is a choice of lifestyle. This is an all-out demonic attack against Christians. In addition to 28-year-old Audrey Hale's attack on the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee, a 27-year-old man who identified as a woman set the 117-year-old Portland Korean church on fire on January 3rd. The suspect, whose legal name is Cameron Storer, claimed to hear voices that threatened to mutilate Storer if Storer refused to burn the church down. Where do you think those voices came from? You don't think those voices came from some political agenda. Those voices came from demons themselves. And so we're watching Satan go absolutely wild. And he's using transgenderism, he's using race, he's using everything he possibly can to tear apart this country. Nashville police have yet to release Hale's manifesto, purportedly due to an ongoing investigation, but officers have said that Hale's views of the transgender issue may have touched off her violent rampage. Police say 40-year-old Peter Ciroli vandalized 3 Roman Catholic churches in New Jersey on the same morning, including burning a 10-foot tall cross on the lawn of St. Patrick's Catholic Church in Woodbury on January 13th. 420 acts of hostility against houses of worship between January of 2018 and September of 2022, not even counting 2023. In all, researchers documented a total of 543 attacks on 517 separate churches. This is not coincidence. Between January 2018 and March 2023. Of the 517 separate churches attacks, 26 of the churches were victimized more than once, with 3 being targeted 3 times each, according to the data provided by the Washington Stand. Let me show it to you. Between 2018 and 2023, American churches have suffered 442 acts of vandalism, 71 cases of arson, 15 gun-related incidents, 14 bomb threats, 25 miscellaneous acts of aggression against church facilities. There's a war going on. Satan's in charge of it, and he's using anything he possibly can. And make no mistake about it, it's against Christians in this church in America, and it's against churches. Why? Because we've allowed the hand of God to be released from us. We've kicked them out of our schools. We've kicked them out of some of our churches. And what's happening is Satan is going absolutely wild. The devils are coming back 7 times more powerful. Churches are also sustained damage from Black Lives Matter riots. Despite the quickening pulse of anti-Christian crimes, some of which have been investigated as hate crimes, conservatives say the Biden administration has been too lax in its response. They haven't had any response. In January, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed Resolution 3, which noted that abortion extremists such as Jane's Revenge had defaced, vandalized, and caused destruction to over 100 pro-life facilities. Didn't hear that on the news. Groups and churches. In 2022, yet the Biden administration has failed to take any action to respond to the radical attacks on pro-life facilities, on groups, or on churches, or to protect the rights of these organizations. So let me say it to you. The Biden administration is lockstep with a satanic agenda for America. The Democratic-controlled Senate has taken absolutely no action. American leaders and citizens alike should condemn acts of hostility against churches and affirm the right for all people to attend their house of worship without feeling targeted or threatened. The Washington Post said that, which is unusual. Speaking of which, let me go there. I don't want to, but moral decay. This is sickening. I'm sick and tired of seeing it. I'm sick and tired of hearing it. Just do it. Drop brands that pay Dylan Mulvaney to mock women. In the last week's trans-identifying activist Dylan Mulvaney, a man who dons makeup and dresses while documenting his journey to girlhood on social media, announced paid partnerships with Bud Light and now Nike. Thankfully, it appears that the more companies that hire Mulvaney to parody women in order to sell their product, the more ire they draw as Americans become increasingly fed up with corporate trans activism. Bud Light's willingness to promote a figure who deeply offends women has also drawn public backlash from celebrities. Musical artist Kid Rock took to social media to share a video of himself outside shooting up a pack of Bud Light with a gun. Likewise, country music star Travis Tritt shared, quote, "I will be deleting all Anheuser-Busch products from my tour hospitality rider. I know many other artists who are doing the same." He added, "Other artists who are deleting Anheuser-Busch products from their hospitality rider might not say so in public for fear of being ridiculed and canceled." He said, "I have no such fear." Nike, who just signed him on, is also facing backlash. Let me interject something here. It's about time Christians boycott some of these companies. And I'm going to give you, let me see if I have this here somewhere. Well, actually, I don't have it until my study, but I'm going to show you a chart later on. I don't drink Bud Light, but I will never buy another Nike product because I'm going to boycott that company. Now, listen, women and men with common sense are sick and tired of watching woke corporation activism destroy brands as they once used every day. This is why a quick search for Nike on Twitter shows a barrage of frustration and calls for boycotting the company, which I totally support, rather than mass support for the decision to platform Mulvaney. This is why both Nike hates women and boycott Anheuser-Busch are trending now on social media, as everyday Americans rally together to express their frustration at being forced to make a political statement with which they disagree if they drink the beer or wear the clothing they've already purchased. Thank God that's happening. There's no doubt that noise is being made. The question is it loud enough to drown out the woke siren song that has ensnared so many mainstream companies? Are conservatives and like-minded individuals willing, listen to it, to make long-term changes to their spending habits to ensure that corporate America receives the message loudly and clearly? Later on in my study, I'll show you those companies that are woke that we need to boycott. It is worth noting that even some of the most traditionally conservative platforms are betraying the truth by caving to the new language of the left. Fox News coverage of Mulvaney's new partnership with Nike frames him as a trans woman. And listen, you may like Fox News, I'm calling them out tonight. and uses female pronouns to describe him. What are they doing? Saying she now has a paid partnership with Nike that is her modeling its sports bras and on social media. My take, he's a male. He's lying to the masses that he's a female, and he is a liar, and he's getting very rich off of it. And Fox News doesn't need to call him a she or a her. How can conservatives hope to form a united front against the trans oppression of women when even right-wing media cowers away from reporting the truth? If such outlets aren't careful, they may find themselves facing the same backlash and rejection as other woke corporation entities. In order for boycotts and calls to action to achieve real change, we, all of us, must sacrifice a luxury that has become all too commonly expected in our modern American lives. That luxury is called convenience. Researching, recording, and keeping tabs on companies with a demonstrated history of contradicting your values is extremely inconvenient. Returning gifts that you've already purchased, choosing new favorites for your pantry, and changing the brands you once defined your personal style are all inconvenient. However, the momentary inconveniences that it takes to send a message to corporate America, radical activists, and the legislators who take their cues from both pales in comparison of the tragedy of allowing eternal truths about biological sex and the beautiful reality of being male or female to be erased in the public square. If you're considering boycotting brands that sponsor Dylan Mulvaney's hateful mockery of women, it's time to take a page out of Nike's book. Just do it. And we need to. We need to boycott these companies. Let me go a little bit further. New bill would have California parents lose parental rights at age 12. California. In California, stranger danger may be about to acquire a whole new meaning. Forget warning kids. If the parents in California will need to be terrified of strangers if a new bill passes. Snuck into AB 665, legislation ostensibly about extending mental health care to lower-income California youths, is a provision that effectively, listen to it, would terminate parents' rights over their kids as soon as they become 12. This bill would allow children as young as 12 years old to consent to being placed into state-funded homes without parental permission or knowledge. What does Satan love to do? He loves to take our kids away. If you can't brainwash them, he'll try to steal them. As long as a mental health professional signs off on it, the kids can go to such a group home, and it doesn't matter what their parents think. That is unconscionable. This bill gives a stranger, a school psychologist, power to decide whether a 6th or 7th grader comes home from school that day, and it's terrifying. This bill is essentially stating that parents are criminals that have to prove their innocence to get their child back. Garfield Jager, who testified against the new California bill, also warned about the dangers of placing minors in new residences. I worked in a group home. I know what they are really like, he said, and they are far from ideal. The social worker said in his testimony, residential facilities lead kids to adopt new harmful habits, such as drug use, self-harm, and violent behavior. Youth residential facilities are usually unlocked, and many kids run away into the hands of sex traffickers, he added. Why are California lawmakers trying to make it easier for kids to face such horrible fates? I should have been allowed to go through this. Chloe, a detransitioner who regretted her gender transition after having her breast removal surgery at 16, told Daily Signal podcast in January. But California lawmakers don't want parents to be able to stand in the way of their minor children making these life-changing decisions. It's apparent that one result of this bill will be the removal of trans-identified children from their family home. In the dystopian nightmare we're in, if a parent doesn't use the child's chosen pronoun or name, they are labeled dangerous, and their 12-year-old can be taken away from them. This legislation is state-sanctioned kidnapping, and it's terrifying that California lawmakers are considering legitimizing, not penalizing kidnapping. I want to say something that's kind of bold and kind of out there. If you live in California and you have children 12 years of age or older and they're having trouble with their identity, move away from California. The last thing you want to do is have somebody take your children away from you because they're going through some phase or some phobia. You have to get out before they take your children. I've given you enough negative news. How many are ready for good news? I hear you all clapping out there. So let me give you some good news. As reported by CBN News, this year's Winterfest, it's a Christian festival, held in February, saw close to 200 people make professions of their faith. During a Sunday morning service, nearly 200 people professed faith in Christ after Minister Jeff Walling asked those who had decided to follow Jesus to stand up and be baptized and step forward. During a second worship service, another 200 people stepped forward to be baptized. This is my 36th year doing Winterfest. I've never seen that, Dudley Chansley, Winterfest's organizer, told the Christian Chronicle. Students began holding gatherings on Friday and Sunday nights, not part of the festival. On one of the Friday meetings, Stark noticed that the gathering went on for 26 hours with people worshiping and praying, no preaching. Students at the school reportedly experienced healings from diseases, including one person who said they were cured of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is POTS, is a condition that causes a person's heart rate to rise when they stand up from a lying position. We saw a healed ankle after a girl struggled to use it properly for the past 15 years, Stark said. Satan may be on the move, but let me give you some good news. God is on the move also. And let me tell you, I'm excited to see it in our youth, because I think sometimes the people who are older have gotten too used to God. They've gotten too used to the old story. We're going to talk about that tonight in our study.